Hello and welcome to this video. This is Ronald here, and today we are going to talk about the books that I read in 2024. Before we even get started, let me give some warnings. First is a spoiler warning to let you know that I'm going to be talking about the books and like why I felt the way I felt about them, right? And then second is a dog warning. You might hear noises in the background. It's the two dogs. So with that being said, let's get into the video. So, because I did like monthly recaps of the books that I read this year, I'm just going to direct y'all to go watch those videos for my thoughts. So, what I'm going to talk about in this video is my favorites and my least favorites of the year. And I've kind of done this like award show style. So, that's what we're doing. So, with that being said, let's talk about the rule. There's really only one rule, and as far as books go, I had to have read the book for the first time in 2024. As far as adaptations go, I had to have watched the adaptation for the first time in 2024. That's pretty much the only rule. Most of the categories are limited to 5. There's only 2 that have 6 choices in them because I just could not narrow it down to 5. I had to include some. So 2 categories have 6. Some of them have less than 5. That's okay. But yeah, most of the categories are limited to 5 and under. So with that being said, let's get into my favorites and least favorites of the year. So I want to start off with positivity. So we're going to talk about my favorite covers of the year. The choices are The Davenports, Island Queen, The Great Gatsby, The End of the Magi, Flashpoint, Wild Women and the Blues. What I like about these covers is that they like grab your attention and they like give you an understanding of what the story is going to be about. But the cover that I choose for my favorite cover of the year would be Wild Women and the Blues. I just really love the way how Honoree looks on this cover. The green dress really just like stands out against that beige background. It really communicates so much about her, about the story. Wild Women in the Blues is my favorite cover of the year. So now let's talk about my least favorite supporting character of the year. This category had like the most options for me to choose from because what I was doing was I was keeping track of like who I would put in this category throughout the year. So when we got to the end of this year, this category had like 10 or 11 characters to choose from, and so these are my top 5. The choices are St. John, Jane Eyre, Jin, The Two, Angel, The Two, Hakam, The End of the Magi, Nicole, Between Lovers. St. John is here because he just got on my nerves, and the fact that he tried to manipulate Jane into marrying him by saying it's God's will, no, it's not. Stop the cap. Jin and Angel are here because of the same issue. Jin is here because she was basically like the leader of the group with air quotes, and she was causing all of the division amongst the group. And she was honestly the reason why they lost so much morale. Angel was here because she disappointed me. She came in with such a strong impression of being like, I can stand on my own, I don't need y'all, only to fold. And she disappointed me because after she folded, she wasn't the same girl she was when she came in. Then her whole character just came about trying to find a boy to be with. Hakam is here because he was the worst in the book. And then Nicole is here because she was perpetuating the situation and she was taking advantage of the situation. We learned that the situation didn't even need to happen because she had already made her choice before the story began. And guilting man into keeping the situation up, oh yeah, no ma'am, you definitely belong here, Nicole. So when it comes to my least favorite supporting character for 2024, my choice is Hakam from The End of the Magi. I will never get over how visceral of a reaction I had when that man reappeared in the book. I thought he was a one and done for one scene, and when he came back, I was like, no, 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 no. I do not want him back. But yeah, he came back. I had such a visceral reaction to him, and I hated his character throughout the entire story. He had a specific purpose, and he represented that purpose well, but I hated him. He was so annoying and irritating, and it's like you went on this whole quest with Marad. You treated him a certain type of way the whole time. Then 20 years later, you're still treating him the same way. After y'all went on this whole quest together, On top of that, then you want to get an attitude when Marah gets an attitude with y'all. Like, of course he gonna have an attitude with y'all. You did him dirty. Like, what do you mean? I could not stand his character. That's why he's my least favorite supporting character of 2024. Now let's talk about my favorite supporting character of 2024. Favorite supporting character: Mina from Dracula, Rachel, My Cousin Rachel, Grandma, Trouble River, Ebony Michelle Washington, Symphony of Secrets, Washington Dwight, The Davenports. Mina, I really liked Mina because it was just nice to see a female character that wasn't a damsel in distress. Mina was putting in that work to stop Dracula. Even after she got bit and was being turned into a vampire, she was still putting in that work to stop him. Rachel from My Cousin Rachel. Rachel was just an interesting and intriguing character, and I just really liked reading her character. Grandma from Trouble River. When I put her here at first, it was a joke, because Trouble River is a children's book, right? So I put her here as a joke at first, but no, she's really here for real now, because Grandma had me crying with laughter in that book, because the whole time she was just complaining and complaining and complaining, but like the complaints were funny. We got Ebony Michelle Washington. Ebony was a great character, and I liked seeing a Black woman character that was smart. She had her own business. She was funny, but she also was like unapologetically Black. And then we get Washington Dwight from The Davenports. When Washington first came about, I thought I wasn't gonna like him because the way he was coming at Olivia, it was like, okay, you're doing too much. But no. What I liked about his character was like, usually when you see characters that try to like challenge other characters, they do it because they want to humble the person. They want to bring them down. He wasn't doing that because of that. He was really like, look, this is what's going on in the world. And yes, you have this privilege, but like you could be using that privilege for so much more than what y'all are using it for. We have an issue going on with Black folks and it affects y'all too. So we need y'all help. My favorite supporting character of 2024. This really came down to between Mina from Dracula and Rachel from My Cousin Rachel. I ended up choosing Rachel from My Cousin Rachel because she was just such an intriguing and interesting character to me. Like, when we got done with that book, you just truly did not know what was what with her. And like, you truly just left that book wondering like, well, what if this had happened? Or like, what if Philip was wrong? Or what if he was right? Like, you don't know what was what with her. Now let's talk about my least favorite antagonist of the year. Jack from The Two, Musa from The End of the Magi, The Sheik from Flashpoint, Frederick Delaney from Symphony of Secrets, and Count Dracula from Dracula. Jack being the villain, it shouldn't have, but it came out of nowhere. The author was dropping clues that he was not to be trusted. The problem is, the only person that didn't trust him in the story was the character who don't trust anybody anyways. It kind of undermined what the author was doing. When his reveal of being a villain came, it shouldn't have been shocking. I'm not gonna say it was shocking, but what it was like, it felt very out of nowhere. The motivation was just because I want to. The main issue is there just wasn't enough development about Jack in order to make because I want to make sense. So then we get Musa from The End of the Magi. Musa just was not there. That lady showed up for like the first 2 chapters of the book, and then after that she was gone. We never saw her again. She never showed up again. And it's crazy because the whole reason that we running around is because of her, but she's not actually there. So then we get the Sheik from Flashpoint. The Sheik has a similar issue to Musa. He just wasn't present in the story that much. Frederick Delaney from Symphony of Secrets. Frederick was irritating. I never liked him, but by the end of the story, I wanted to punch him in the face. Dracula is in this category, not because he was a terrible villain, but because there's a point in the story where Van Helsing is like, Dracula has the mind of a teenager. That kind of killed Dracula's character a little bit for me, because everything he did after that, I couldn't take seriously. Because now, instead of seeing him as like this centuries old vampire with all this intelligence and knowledge and wisdom, and he'd been here longer than the human characters, now I see him as a teenage vampire who is acting out. It killed the seriousness of Dracula's character a little bit. That's why he's here in the category for that. My least favorite antagonist for 2024 was the Sheik, because he was barely in the book. His motivation didn't make sense. We got all this information about him scattered throughout the book, but none of it seemed to connect, and none of it seemed to impact his motivation. Like, we learn he has a brother, we learn he has a family. that doesn't connect to his motivation at all. He's patterned himself after this ancient sheik. Doesn't connect to his motivation. And then on top of that, his motivation doesn't make sense because he doesn't actually have an actual beef with the protagonist. He has a direct impact, but it's not a strong impact. Because the way the story is set up, he's not in an actual direct beef with the protagonist and with America in general. He's in a beef with somebody else. The protagonist kind of just stumbled into his beef and then brought America into the beef. They jumped in a fight that really had nothing to do with him. The sheik didn't make sense, his motivation didn't make sense, and everything we learned about him was scattered and none of it connected to his motivation, and that's why he's my least favorite antagonist of the year. So then let's talk about my favorite antagonist of the year. Count Dracula from Dracula, Eric, Phantom of the Opera, The Headless Horseman, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, Rachel, my cousin Rachel, Dracula. I know I put him in the least favorite antagonist category, but he's also in the favorite antagonist category because before that, he was a great villain. He was threatening. He felt impossible to beat. I'm kind of mixed on Eric as a antagonist. I didn't hate him as a villain. He created some iconic story moments from what he did, but it's like, you're a terrible person. The Headless Horseman from The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, he was a great villain because he's the true hero of the story. He's the actual hero of the story. Like I said in favorite supporting character, you're not really sure about Rachel when you finish the story. So you're not really sure whether she's a victim or a villain, because there's enough evidence to support either stance. She does do some things that are questionable. She does do some things that are purposely driven by her own self-interest. My favorite antagonist of the year is Dracula. I know I put him in least favorite antagonist too, but before that, and even a little after the reveal, like relating to his threat level, he really gave that like energy of I am unbeatable, and it really felt like he was unbeatable. Even at the end, they were struggling to beat him. Now let's talk about least favorite protagonist. Philip from My Cousin Rachel, Man the protagonist from Between Lovers, Matt the Two, Sean Trey Woods, Flashpoint, Frederick Delaney, Symphony of Secrets. The way I can sum up this whole category, all of them have the same issue. All 5 annoying grown man children. I would be more forgiving towards Matt if he was like a young character, like say like 18 or 19. But the problem is Matt is 28, but he reads like he's 18 because the way that he's written, and most of the characters treat him and his sister like they're children, but they are like 28 and 27. One minute they talking about they kids, next minute they talking about taking shots and all this other type of stuff. Like they are grown. The problem is that Matt sided with Jen on her division and everything she was doing. Matt is supposed to be the actual leader of the group, but he just delegated to Jen because Jen had a stronger personality and that's his girlfriend and she likes to be in control. So he just let her be in control. And it was because of that Jen was allowed to cause all the division and lower the morale. My least favorite protagonist of the year is Man from Between Lovers. He got on my nerves from the beginning, but then as we get further in the book, to understand that the whole situation is his fault, and then to get further into the book and to discover he's keeping the situation up and he doesn't have to be because he doesn't actually have an actual for real reason to be here, it really just annoyed me. He was irritating and he was annoying and he kept up this whole situation that didn't need to be kept up. So then we get into my favorite protagonist of the year. Olivia, Helen, Ruby, and Amy Rose from the Davenports. Dolly from Island Queen. Alberta from Leaving Cecil Street. Josephine Reed, Symphony of Secrets. Dr. Bern Hendricks, Symphony of Secrets. Honoree Dalcour, Wild Women in the Blues. So the girls from the Davenports, I just really like their characters, and I enjoyed reading an ensemble cast, and I didn't hate any of the characters on the ensemble cast. Dolly was a great character. She went through all of that, but she was still resilient and she was still able to be successful. Alberta from Leaving Cecil Street was my favorite character in the book. Every time I got finished her perspective, I couldn't wait to get back to her perspective so I could find out more about her. Like, she just had an interesting story. Josephine Reed from Symphony of Secrets, I loved everything about her character. Dr. Bern Hendricks, he's smart, but he's also unapologetically black. He's this awkward black guy who loves music, but he's also unapologetically black. Honoree Dalcour. I think what I enjoyed most about her was just like how she had like this rough exterior, but she had like this really soft interior. Like the rough exterior was just a defense mechanism, but once you got past it, you got to the real Honoree. And the real Honoree was just a 19-year-old girl living in Chicago who was just trying to make it the best way she could because she was out here on her own. She ain't had nobody. She was just trying to live her life and mind her business. That's all she was trying to do. And be a star. That's it. So my favorite protagonist of the year was Josephine Reed. I loved her character. I loved everything about her character. The way she was written, the way she described the world around her. She wasn't treated like she was not a person, and she wasn't treated like she didn't know what she was doing or that she needed help in life. Like, yes, she was autistic, but she was still a person. She still had feelings, had dreams, she still had goals, she still had things that she wanted to do and things that she wanted to accomplish. She still fell in love with a man who unfortunately did not love her back. That's why I loved her character, because she was still a person and she was an interesting person. And I will say this, up until Symphony of Secrets, Alberta had this spot. She had this on lock, but once I read Josephine, I was like, nope, it's Josephine all the way. So then we get favorite classic. Favorite classics are Jane Eyre, Dracula, The Phantom of the Opera, My Cousin Rachel, and Passing. My choice for favorite classic is Dracula. So now let's talk about my least favorite adaptation. We got Gatsby, 2013, Dracula, 1931, Jane Eyre, 1970, Dracula 2, Ascension. Gatsby. It's disappointing that this was the only version I could access. I did not like this movie. Like, the effects were too much. Like, I don't know why. It just didn't work for me. I felt like it was too much. We got Dracula from 1931. First of all, Dracula 1931 is based on a play that's adapted from the book. The problem is they changed so much of the story and made it worse. The characters aren't recognizable. Like, they really don't do anything in the story except run around screaming. The only interesting character in the story is Dracula. And even then, I'm not even sure if it's because he's interesting or if it's just because this version of him is so well known and so iconic. The changes in this story didn't make sense. Jane Eyre 1970 was just boring, hot mess, and the changes didn't make sense at all. Then we got Dracula 2 Ascension. Dracula 2 Ascension was boring, and it was set up for the second part of this two-part movie. My least favorite adaptation of the year was Dracula 2 Ascension because that movie was boring. And it doesn't help that it was the first part of a two-part movie, and that part 2 was the more interesting and better part. And it doesn't help that part 2 didn't really need part 1 to work. Part 1 needs part 2 to work. Part 2 didn't need part 1. So then we get into my favorite adaptation of the year. Sense and Sensibility 2024, Blackula, The Color Purple 2023, The Phantom of the Opera 1925, Passing. Sense and Sensibility 2024, that was probably one of the movies I was looking forward to the most in 2024. I was so excited for it. Blackula, I really enjoyed Blackula. Is it an adaptation of Dracula? Not necessarily. It's not really even using the story of Dracula. It just kind of uses the character for a little bit. But I really enjoyed Blackula because it was fun. And I enjoyed that Blackula, he had an actual character. He had actual motivations. The Color Purple 2023. I was excited for this movie. I liked it. I enjoyed it. I didn't go into it expecting the original movie. Now, I will say this. That was a whole lot of singing. And so I understand why people at the end was like, Lord, please don't let them give Sierra a song. Because I was the same way. I was like, Lord, please don't let them give Sierra a song. I don't want to sit through another long song. I'm ready to be done. Like, once we got I'm Here from Fantasia, I'm like, she's here. Let's go. That was a great song, but I was ready to go. Like, this movie 2 hours and 30 minutes long, and it got all this singing. Good Lord. Then we got Phantom of the Opera 1925. I watched a lot of versions of Phantom of the Opera. I liked all of them, but I think this one was my favorite because it was the most faithful. Passing was a wonderful, well done movie, and Passing helped to make Irene. They helped you to sympathize with her more than you did when you read the book. She didn't really come across as sympathetic, but that's the point, because none of those characters are sympathetic. But at least in the movie, you got more of an understanding of her character and why she was being the way she was. So I just like the movie. I like the way they did it. I like the style. It was great. My favorite adaptation of the year is the one that has its own video. I don't think I can express enough the anticipation and excitement I had for this adaptation, and then to finally get to see it and to see how well done and how beautiful it was and amazing. It didn't let me down. It was great. It told us it was going to be great, and it was great. And just like to see the level of care and involvement that everybody had with it, I enjoyed it. I truly did. So now let's talk about my least favorite book of the year. There's only one choice in this category because it's the only book of the year that I did not like, and that is Between Lovers. I just didn't like this book. I think I've expressed enough when talking about Nicole and when talking about Man, what I didn't like about this book. Actually, if you want to know why I didn't like the book, you can go watch my video on it. I made a whole video on it. I didn't like the characters. I didn't like that they were perpetuating the situation that they didn't need to perpetuate. Like, they were all annoying. And because they're annoying, the situation's annoying. So then we get into my favorite book of the year. Leaving Cecil Street by Diane McKinney Whetstone. Symphony of Secrets, Brendan Slocum. Wild Women in the Blues by Denny S. Bryce. The Davenports by Crystal Marquise. Island Queen by Dr. Vanessa Riley. My favorite book of the year was Leaving Cecil Street because I just could not put this book down. Now, to me, it kind of came across as like Tumbling reskinned, but Tumbling was a great book. It had a lot of similar elements, but I did enjoy the book, and it was my favorite book of the year. I could not put that book down. That was my favorites and least favorites of 2024. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Give it a like, comment on it, subscribe to the channel, check out more content from me, and I'll see you next time.